Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Garden of Thought, proudly presented by the Sports Jedi Media Network on YouTube, Sports Jedi Network everywhere else. Also on the Garden of Thought platform, both audio and on YouTube at Garden of Thought Pod, and in the most likely of places of all, the Wrestling Soup Network. So where else would you expect it? Today's guest is Paul Skorpen, and we are talking about two things. And as he mentioned to me just moments ago, there's only about 10,000 years between them. So, that's just a blink of a geological eye. And luckily, we're not talking specifically about geology, but we're going to talk about the goddess. And we're also going to talk about the Tepes. The two are not necessarily connected. They might not be connected at all, but who knows? Everything's connected in some way, shape, or form, as
True enough.
Hal Holbrook explained to Tony Soprano and the injured rapper. They were all in the hospital together in that season of The Sopranos. So, using quantum theory. So, Mr. Scorpion, thank you very much for being here. Tell the
Most
world a little bit about yourself.
sure. I'm sitting here outside of Munich, Germany. I've been living in Germany for 29 years. It's a long story. I was born and raised in the United States, uh, but my father at the time was politically very active, and he was against the Vietnam War. And he actually was a very brave man. Told people to tear up their draft cards and to give blood to the Viet Cong. So we had to race across America to go to Maine. So because we got death threats in the middle of the night. Okay, so we landed in Maine, and that's where went to school. I went to two different universities, and I studied sociology and philosophy. And then I took
Was either
advantage.
Bowdoin?
I'm sorry.
Was either University Bowdoin?
No, no, it was I went to first to Hampshire College, and because of my dyslexia, I had to drop out, and I went to University of Maine in Orono
Okay.
because I could study there for free because my father was
Sorry, my
faculty.
dad went to Bowdoin, so I was looking for a little connection there.
Okay, no. And then at the last second, I signed up with the University of Wisconsin to study in Kathmandu Valley. So I headed off to Kathmandu after learning Nepali in University of Wisconsin, and there I
Sorry,
went to
how,
study
how long did it take you to learn Nepali?
uh, the whole summer.
That's it?
Yeah, and
Very
I could
impressive.
speak fluently, but then I had to learn. Then I had to learn Greek, and then I had to learn German, and German is a complicated language. So, yeah. So, so it's
You're
like
good
this.
with
Just
languages.
so I know, but then I went there to study shamanism for a reason because my university professor was a Cypriot who was writing a book about a Christian mystic on the island of Cyprus. Okay, so I headed off to Kathmandu Valley, where I had a fantastic time. But I realized it was just training for to study with this mystic. But on my way, I got accepted to a 5 year study to study Sanskrit at Banaras Hindu University, which I put on the back burner because once I reached Cyprus, I was invited to stay and work with this Christian mystic and healer. So that's my life in a nutshell. I'm sorry, I speak German all the time, and then my wife was an actress, and then she said, Paul, your time now is coming to an end in Cyprus because your teacher now has now passed over. If you want to be with me, I have to be in Munich. I said, fine, I'll come to Munich because I love Munich. And since then, I have an institute called Theosis Institute where I actually teach healing. I'm known as a healer. Never planned to be a healer, but I'm known as a healer. Doesn't matter. It's a pretty crazy life, and I just finished my memoir, so that'll all be explained there. But then I had the impulse to go to go into the roots of Christianity because every religion has roots.
Sure.
And so I started to investigate old Egyptian belief system, and I started to investigate the Greco-Roman traditions, which I went deeply into. And then I caught wind of a dig they were doing in southeast Turkey, which is Göbekli Tepe, but we'll come to that later. And so, and that's my life, as crazy as it may seem. And our two children
Yeah.
live in Los Angeles. Yeah,
I mean, had things gone just a little bit differently, you could have been Batman and Christian Bale could have been you.
exactly,
Yeah. Okay.
exactly.
All right.
Yeah,
Well, all right. So, my little nonsense aside, because at a little point there, it did sound like sort of like Batman Begins, a little bit. Uh,
yeah.
but clearly not. So, how many languages do you speak?
Well, I did speak Nepalese fluently, but then I had to learn Greek, and then because German is so damn complicated, I had to learn German. So and I
Oh,
speak
sure, you
some,
live there.
yeah, but then I speak some Italian too.
Okay, so sounds about five. I'm not. There's not going to be a test. Believe me.
Uh,
English is my second language. I have no first language. So, um, all right. So, at some point when you were studying the roots of Christianity, obviously this got you on the part of the goddess part, and I would say the roots of Christianity, are the roots of every religion, as well, probably older than we even know. Um,
exactly.
but since you're the guest, I'm going to let you pick up sort of where you sort of found this thread and kept pulling on it, and until you had
All
a
right.
working thesis, so to speak.
Okay, so let me explain it like this, Jeff. So because I live in Munich, the advantage of living in Munich is that you can take these 2.5 hour flights to different cities to do like a weekend away. And I was pretty exhausted for some reason because I was doing so many teachings in Denmark and in Austria and places like that, that I decided to book a weekend just to relax. And then I was going to go to Spain because I wanted to go to Seville, where they had all the religions were at peace there at one time. But a friend told me, "Why don't you go to Ephesus?" And I wasn't aware of Ephesus, but he said you should go there because of your interest in Christianity. We know that the Mother Mary was living there after the crucifixion. We know that John was there, and so on and so on. So I said, okay, so I'll book a flight there. And so I booked a flight, like a 3-day flight to Ephesus, and I was going through the old city of Ephesus, which was pretty interesting, and I was going to the House of Mary, which was interesting. And then I decided to pay a visit to the archaeological museum in Selçuk. Selçuk is the town which is connected to Ephesus. That's where the
Right, Selçuk and the Selçuk. There was a Selçuk Caliphate for a while, right, or Sultanate.
exactly. But then I walked into the archaeological museum, and I was just going through their collection. It's a very small museum. And first, it starts with the stuff that they found in the old city of Ephesus, and then it starts with pottery and coins. And then I walked into a room, a darkened room, and I looked to my left, and there was a goddess there in a form, and to the right was a goddess. They're known as the beautiful Artemis and the great Artemis. And to tell you the truth, I was a little bit mesmerized because I didn't know about these. This was one goddess in two different forms. They were found together, actually buried together in the soils of Ephesus by the followers, found in 1956. And that got me going because the what you call the how Artemis is presented. Now, this is the complicated thing about Artemis because she has so many different expressions. The Romans called her Diana and made her as a huntress with a bow and arrow and a miniskirt going through the woods. And then there's the Artemis of Ephesia, which is the great Artemis, the original Artemis, which has a link to now we go back to Sibylla or Sibylla. I say a lot of these names in German, but Sibylla, she has many names, but Sibylla, which goes back to Catalahuk. Catalahuk, I take it, this neighborhood, and it's
I
just
think I've
this
heard of Cata. Oh no, I'm thinking of
Catalahuk
Catahook.
is it's probably one of the oldest cities in the world, along with Jericho, and it's in the middle of Turkey. In any case, that's where they celebrated this female deity with the big legs and the big. She's in the middle of giving birth. She has two lions on her sides,
Yep.
and she's believed to be Sibylla or Kabila. Okay, and then
I'm sorry. Is there
that,
any connection between her and, like, say, Ayana or Astarte or
yeah, this is the
Ishtar?
thing. Like Shakespeare
Entire.
said, a rose is a rose by any other name. They're somehow all connected. It's just that every culture tried to bring them into their own form. You know, so like for
I wasn't
example,
aware that Artemis was a fertility goddess, though. I mean, maybe
she's not.
Aphrodite sort of
She's called,
supplanted that.
she's actually called the first midwife. She's the first midwife because she wasn't a fertility goddess. but she was responsible for everything. If you read the work of Homer, um, she was responsible for everything, the animal world, the everything. She took care of everything. That's why the people loved Artemis there. That's why Christianity had to fight for 400 years to get rid of her. Because she served every purpose they needed. That she brought people into life without pain. She brought people into death without pain. This is the whole paradox about, Jeff, to tell you the truth, this is the whole paradox about Artemis, because you have the Diana form, which is a huntress, which is killing animals. And then you have this other form, which would never kill an animal,
Right.
She would, because she was the mother of all the animals. She was the mother of life. So in that way, she is a fertility goddess, but she herself was a lifelong virgin, like the Mother Mary,
Right. She was
Symbolic.
Apollo's twin sister, but they didn't get
Well, no,
along.
this is the thing, because now we have this film out about Odyssey, or Odysseus, and the thing is, if you know something about Homer, which I'm sure you do, Homer lived about probably 800 years before the Christian era began, and he was probably blind, as far as we know. So he didn't write this stuff down himself, but he had. Don't get me wrong. I made a number of films on YouTube. You can look at them, called "Don't Be Such a Homer," using the English expression, right? Because he had an agenda. He wanted to place Apollo above Artemis, and he wanted to place Zeus above Hera. Now, one of the key things here, Jeff, if I may, and interrupt me anytime if you want, is that the Greeks had this idea of a chthonic goddess. Do you know the Greek word chthonic?
It's well, it sounds familiar, but I'm not sure I know the correct. So,
Well, it's spelled funny. It's spelledChtonic, chthonic. And this idea of the chthonic goddesses, and there are many of them, and this is what I'm getting at, pre-existed the Olympian gods. Okay, so chthonic means in Greek an earth god or an underworld goddess. That's what it means by fact. And Artemis was one of those. Hera was one of those. Hecate was one of those. Probably Aphrodite was one of those. Demeter was definitely one of those. And so they go way back. They go way back before the Greco-Roman arrival from the mainland.
So before Persephone got tricked with the pomegranates and whatever, there were other.
Exactly. Because Demeter is an earth goddess by herself, and so this is the whole confusion between the twins, because the twins are the children of Leto, who's a Titan, by the way. She's not an Olympian god. She belongs to the earlier gods. And apparently she was beautiful, but I think Zeus didn't care how beautiful you were. He just wanted to get you in the sack, as it were.
Zeus was
broken. Yeah, so Leto gave birth to twins, but this is only recorded from Homer. Now, I have no problem with Homer, except that I think that he was probably one of the first misogynists, and I mean that.
Oh,
because
I don't think he was one of the first. I think he just wrote down some of the thoughts of the
prevailing
day.
Exactly, because he definitely had an agenda to promote patriarchy over matriarchy. He definitely did. Yeah.
Well, that's sort of been the story of the last 5,000-6,000 years or so, hasn't it? I mean,
yeah, about 3,000 years, really, because I think matriarchy was doing pretty well as long as Artemis and Isis were in charge of everything. But the dates don't matter, like you said. It doesn't really matter. I just know the advent of patriarchy started with the Judeo-Christian tradition more, but it started with Homer, actually, or before Homer. I think the seeds were planted, because actually Anatolia means in Greek the land of the rising sun, Anatolia. And Anatolia was really a place of matriarchy going way, way back. Way back, because
are most of the earliest figurines thought to be sort of Mother Earth,
almost exclusively.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, I know there's that one man with a figure of a lion, with like a lion's head.
Even in Jerusalem, they found 60 figures of a Shada with her head chopped off.
Of who?
You know, a Shada or a Sata, that's the same. That's the
Oh,
same.
a start. Yeah, I mean, yeah. Okay. I mean, we're talking about the same. I'm just pronouncing it differently.
Exactly. Yeah.
Astarte, who's basically Ishtar, who was sort of Inanna, who might have influenced Aphrodite.
Exactly. Yeah.
Who
So
is
in any
Freya?
case, once I was in this once I was in this darkened room of the archaeological museum, it started something. It started something, a movement in me, and I want to know more about the goddess energy. And that's why one of the nice things about Ephesus, and that's why I lead retreats there every year, is that when you're in Ephesus, you can do these day trips to 3 major Artemis temples. One is in Seljuk, the other one's in Sardis, and the other one's in Magnesia. And there were 3 different forms of Artemis. But also from there, you can take a 2-hour trip to Lagina, where they have a temple complex, or it's out in the middle of nowhere, for Hecate or Hecata. And it's a fascinating place because it's basically a portal to the underworld. You can feel it there. And also there's a Hellenic town on a hillside, which is called Prim. I don't know if you know it. It's one of the best preserved Hellenic towns in Anatolia, and there they have a
Let me
sanctuary.
translate a little bit for folks who maybe don't know. So Anatolia is like Western Turkey, but at the time,
Well, Anatolia is a whole continent, or the whole land of, that's Turkey. Okay. But there's the West Coast, which is where this is all taking place. Okay.
right, and
So
there were a lot of Greek colonies, cities,
they're going all the
and
way to Konya. Yeah, going
yeah,
all the way. The Greeks
and
really penetrated.
they all considered themselves part. I mean, Greece wasn't a word yet, but they all considered themselves part of the, I guess, Achaean or
Well, they
Hellenistic world.
distinguished themselves as Hellenes. They basically distinguished themselves as Greek, but Hellenic Greeks, pre-Greek. Yeah,
Right.
right. And so this is the thing, when you do like a retreat. I'm not doing an advertisement for my retreat at all, but when you do a retreat in Ephesus, you can reach also the Aphrodisia town, which is a beautiful town built for the goddess Aphrodite. That's about 2.5 hours away, and there's a lot to see there, actually. Yeah, and a lot of
So,
people, most people who take a trip to Ephesus, they just go to the old city, or go to the Apollo temple.
so how
Yeah.
does Artemis and who you connected earlier to Isis, how did they take us to Ashura, who is also sort of Levantine, but in different names, different variations of the same word, sort of is the bride to, the king of the gods. She's the queen of the gods.
Exactly. Well, she was actually first married to Baal, and then she was married to the Jewish God.
Yahweh.
Because but they find figurines of her along the Sea of Galilee, always holding a baby. You know, I don't know if you
Are we
know the
sure
work of.
that Baal and Yahweh were different, or just
No,
the
I think
same
they were.
character
I
written by different
overlap.
guys?
I think they overlap, Jeff. It doesn't matter. But anyhow, she was famously known as a wife of Baal for a long time, and then she was embraced also by the early Jews as the female counterpart to Jehovah. Yeah,
Now, was she the wife of Yahweh or El, or are we talking
yeah,
about after they were sort of more merged into one?
Yahweh. This is
Okay.
the whole thing. My theory now, getting into it a little bit now, because now we're all over the place, is because I've been to Palestine or Israel over 70 times in this life. My wife and I were actually married in the old city in a German church. Um, um, the thing is about the Sea of Galilee. This was the breadbasket of the Holy Land, because you could plant crops 4 times a year and harvest 4 times a year. But that's where they really celebrated Ashara more than the male god. And it makes sense, because if you have crops, you need a female god to help you with the crops. If you have an animal who's sick, you need a female god to help you with the animal. If a pregnancy is not going well, you need a female goddess to help you with the pregnancy, you know. But the thing is, as this all unfolded, because it took a long time before the Jews put together their holy book. They didn't do it 200 years before Christ, I guess, something like that. Yeah, doesn't matter. And by then, they decided that they wanted to remove the feminine aspects from their belief system.
Well,
Like,
parts of it were written before that in Babylon.
I know
I
exactly.
mean,
So they
when the stories actually started, some of them were supposed to be much older, of course, just like everything else. But it's interesting because this might not be connected at all, but there is an overlap in time from stories to writing and patriarchy to or matriarchy to patriarchy, sort of in this part of the world. Do you think that it's at all tied to the quote Bronze Age collapse unquote? Do you think sort of like the chaos that ensued sort of led to people thinking they needed to be more at war, and that shifted to a
well,
male war god?
this is the whole thing. Yes and no, to answer your question. I think that when there's a natural calamity like the small dryas or an ice age, it makes people a little bit harder, you know, because they have to go into a survival modus, you know, and then they
Sure,
have to
we've
compete.
all seen The Walking Dead. We know how it goes.
Exactly. They have to compete for food, and they have to compete for land, and they have to compete for water, and they have to compete for livestock and everything like that. So that's when it starts going in another direction. Yeah. If you
Okay.
ask me, the thing is that there's a very interesting study done, and anybody can look into it. Is that after the younger Dryas started to lift, and that's when they started building Göbekli Tepe, and you know. They found out that the Y chromosome was missing in the population, and so they found out that probably to every male that was born, 17 girls were born. Now, this is you can read about this because the what decides whether a embryo is going to be a boy is the Y chromosome, and for
Sure.
some reason,
I mean,
yeah,
that sounds like a herd animal ratio.
it does, doesn't it? I think this poor boy was a little bit. Anyhow,
Confused most of his life.
yeah, probably. And also the gene pool was pretty small.
Oh yeah, I mean, talk about creation stories. Holy,
Yeah,
holy
no,
creation stories, Batman.
actually, you can read about that. It's not my imagination. So this is like here in Germany. After Germany was destroyed, who built Germany up was the women. You know, right? Because they were the only ones remaining. The German men were
They're right, but not because more of them were born. It's just less of them were killed. So less
exactly.
of them were dead. I mean that part makes sense. That would be interesting to figure out where. But so, but
No, the whole link. Going back to your question
oh
now,
right,
the whole link about between like this area of Ephesus or the west coast of Anatolia going into the Levant, going into Egypt, is that you basically have a sisterhood, if you will, you know, because the divine feminine played a major role in old Egypt after Osiris was killed by his brother, and that's when the divine feminine started to rule old Egypt. Of course, it's bled into other cultures because they met on the Red Sea, and that's where you find these incredible complexes now, which are going back 15,000 years, but now we're going into the future. But staying focused on the divine feminine, uh, the Canaanites and these people who were occupying the Levant, I think they shared goddess and gods clearly, you know, because
yeah,
of traffic or whatever. Yeah, but if you take Anatolia, that's a little bit then disconnected from that. The only thing that connects that is the Fertile Crescent. So the Fertile Crescent starts around Jerusalem, Jericho, and goes all the way up into Göbekli Tepe and a little beyond. And there was traffic there as well, you know.
sure. Yeah, the trade routes there. I mean, even before there was a Silk Road, there was something. Those trails. They just didn't call it a
Exactly.
Silk Road yet.
No, no,
Before there was silk, there was a Silk Road. They were
exactly.
roads,
Yeah, yeah,
and they were called the steppes. For the most part.
exactly. Yeah.
like the ancient world superhighways.
Yeah.
That I've learned about three things, and I can only remember two of them offhand that got short shrift in my education, and I'm going to say our education because I think it got a pretty good public school education in the 70s and 80s. And one was how important the steps were, how significant the Eastern Roman Empire was, because it really sort of it's like it, Rome fell. Oh yeah, then there was something called the Holy Roman Empire, but that was just Charlemagne pretending. And then then the Ottomans took over. Skip over like 900 years of great importance. If the third thing comes to me, I'll spit it out. If not, but we can move on. But but Asherah, do you think at some point had a higher function than Yahweh, sort of like you implied earlier that Hera was above Zeus? Because
I do.
none of the myths that made it too popular now. I mean,
No, I no, I
Zeus is the boss of bosses. Like all the other gods combined, they're like we do what Zeus says.
no, I understand your question, and if you ask me personally, I would say yes. I think that they embraced more the goddess than they did a remote god.
Though it's interesting, I could be wrong about this. I have no idea because I don't know how history would play out. But if history would have played out on the same place, just with Greek mythology, Greek religion continuing along, I do think that it was setting up for Athena actually to be the successor to Zeus, as opposed to Apollo, which sort of maybe indicates a movement to bring back your notion of the sacred feminine, which pops up a
Yeah,
lot. I mean,
I mean,
see the Da
there's
Vinci Code for reference.
the best example of a goddess. I mean, she's a god of war, and she spent her pregnancy in Zeus's head. It's just
Right. Well, she's a virgin birth. I mean, like it's the goddess, but
exactly.
she came right out of his gray matter. But she's
Yeah,
not just war; she's tactics. I mean, Ares is war.
exactly,
She's
exactly. No,
strategy. She's thinking. Ares is the boar that comes at you with its tusks. She's the one
exactly.
who sets up the trap where the
Well,
boar runs into a pit and gets hit with six arrows.
the thing about the Greek tradition is they have so many goddesses which are very, very complicated, like Aphrodite, who's a beautiful goddess, and like Demeter, who's in charge of the crops and everything like that. And so they have a god for every season, as it were,
Yeah.
and for every purpose. Just like the Egyptians, by the way.
Yeah,
Uh,
I mean, but just like the pagans too, they just named them instead of calling them, the water sprite or the river sprite or the
exactly.
brook sprite.
And
You
then
can't just have one water god. You got to have one for salt water and fresh water, and then like every variation of those waters.
yeah, and then the Romans had to rename them. Yeah,
Well, of
yeah.
course. I mean, if you're Rome, you're gonna rename them. I mean, if you're gonna, I mean, you wouldn't have the Alexander the Great Center for Performing Arts. You would have change it to the Julius Caesar Center for Performing Arts.
No, but I want to share with you a short paradox before we move on. Is that the thing about Ephesus is Ephesus was a major metropole, and it was the first seat of Christianity. Then they moved it to Constantinople. So Ephesus was known as the main seat of Christianity, and in that way, you would think that Ephesus by itself is very male, because first the Greeks built it up, and then the old city of Ephesus today is about 99% Roman, by the way, almost all Roman structures. The old city of Ephesus was destroyed. They moved three times. Um, but around Ephesus and around that whole area, there are mostly, and I know this because I've been there so many times, there are mostly temples and sanctuaries for the goddesses and very few for the gods. Okay, so you have this great temple for Apollo and Didma, which is extraordinary. It was never finished, but it's extraordinary. And then you have a number of minor temples for Zeus, but basically you have one after the other. You have temples for the goddesses spread throughout the whole landscape there, which most people don't know that because they associate it with the Greco-Roman time. But as I'm saying, if you go back alone outside of Ephesus, Turkey's a funny country, by the way. It's just a really strange country, and that's not that's not. I'm not going against Turkey at all. But they found, and they started to dig out two 10,000-year-old communities about 3 kilometers outside of Ephesus. And these communities are Neolithic, going back 12,000 years probably. But because Turkey says no, Ephesus has to do with Christianity or the Greco-Roman time, let's forget that and let's bury it. So they just covered it up. Yeah. You can see that on my website, by the way, because they were doing a dig there.
What do you think the significance of that is? Do you think it was to bury the evidence of the feminine goddesses being more important than the male gods, or?
Because Turkey knows how to sell itself really well. They do. That's why if we get onto the Göbekli Tepe, they talk about data inflations, and they want to say bigger and older all the time. That's what they do all the time. They say this temple's much older than Göbekli Tepe. It's not even true, because they want to market it. That's how they make money off of this. No, I think it's different than that. I think it's because what we know about, now we're going to switch a little bit to Göbekli Tepe. That area there was the first place where they did agriculture around Göbekli Tepe.
Okay.
And these people moved west. They moved out of there and they moved west, and they brought their technology with them. They also brought a lot of their temple technology with them. So the people who probably settled outside of Ephesus were probably originally from that area.
So this is the Indo-European people migration, or at least in this iteration.
All the way to England, by the way.
Yeah, it looks like we're going to get a picture. Yep. Okay.
Yeah. So
now,
what we're shifting gears.
I've been to Ephesus, and if you ever just want to go one place in your life to see ruins from Greek and Roman, like Ephesus probably is a great one place to pick to do it. I mean, I'm sure that there's others there, but like I've been to the Parthenon and the Acropolis, and Heracleion was close, but a lot of that is sort of sub layers that you have to look down in, and you can't go. Ephesus, you're walking around in a city. It's like you're on a movie set, but it's real. So
yes, it's very much like a movie set.
Yeah. So anyway, a little plug there. And Turkey's money isn't worth a darn, so you get a pretty good value if you're there. Anyway,
But they tripled their entry fees. But good for them.
I'm sure they did, and also I guess they're not part of the EU, so they're still on their own money. They're just part of NATO, sort of.
They want part, yeah.
All right.
NATO.
Yeah, right, sort of. But they're also in a mutual defense pact now with Saudi Arabia and Pakistan, which how that's going to play out is interesting and terrifying. But I mean, I guess that's been the state of the world, maybe always interesting and terrifying, just depending on how much you know or don't know. Anyway, speaking of interesting and terrifying, what is going on with? So, I first learned about Göbekli Tepe in a novel. I don't know, probably around 25 years ago, and I wasn't even sure it was real or not, and then I did, and probably learning that it was real might be one of the reasons this show exists today, because it's just so fascinating and so old, and then they found another, which I think is called Karahan Tepe. I mean, it doesn't Tepe just mean mound or something like that. And now my understanding is that there's tepes all over the place, and the original operating theory was that the way cultures were then, there was no civilization. So the only way you could get all these people to do this enormous task of building just Göbekli, that structure with the, aside from giants or aliens or gods doing it, was that it had to be like a religious congregational center. But now that they found many of them, I mean, that sort of dilutes that theory. Unless there were a whole lot more people than you thought there were.
Okay, let me talk to you a little bit about these different complexes as they were, because it's a very you're walking on rice paper when you call it a temple complex, because many people want, especially the archaeologists, they want to call it a meeting hall,
right?
Which I don't buy, because first of all, if you take Haran Plain, Haran Plain is a flat area, and it's like a horseshoe area, and around that are the temple complexes, and basically in a U-shaped form around that. And I've been to all of them except one. And I led a private tour from people from Belgium and from Netherlands last November, and I went to two new ones, including Mendik Tepe and Shaman Tepe. Now, mind you, these temple complexes are not protected. They're just not protected. They can't do it, first of all, because they're all about 10 hectares. I don't know how many acres that is, large. So they have to put a huge fence around them.
So the biggest army in the world can't protect it.
No, this is true.
And so the biggest armies in the world.
They only do the digging during which is crazy to me. They only do the digging during the summer months when it's like 50 degrees Celsius. But that's when the kids have, that's when they bring the kids from Istanbul or from other countries to do the digs. So, I mean, it's don't travel there in August or July because it literally reaches 110 degrees Fahrenheit. So the thing is that each one of these temple complexes, and I can say this because I've been to many of them, are very unique. They have very little in common with each other. So take, for example, Göbekli Tepe and Karahan Tepe. They're about 30 kilometers separated from each other. Okay, but the thing is, with Göbekli Tepe, there are very few presentations of human form. Mostly animals and things like this. Some that exist and some that don't exist. In Karahan Tepe, they're finding a number of human presentations, including a man holding his phallus, which is a fertility symbol. So,
or just an accurate picture of what men generally do.
In this case, I don't think so, because we have a number of images of that, including Sybug, which is
little side story, just to check it. Okay, when my first child was born, and obviously it was with my first wife, my father is helping to he's learning how to change diapers again. First of all, my dad's from the generation where they really didn't change diapers. Secondly, diapers have changed a lot since. I mean, I know I look very young, but they changed a lot since this was in a diaper, and even my younger brother is in his mid-50s. So he's learning, and of course, the boy is pulling his pud, and my first wife says, which at the time I would call her my wife, said, "How long is he going to do that?" And my father goes, "Until he's 90."
No, but the thing is, this is a whole thing about these temple complexes, is that you basically have two camps. Okay, you have the archaeologists who don't know better than anybody else what they're looking at because there's nothing written down, and they don't understand the technology. They really don't, because
there's images. They just don't know how to interpret the images.
They say we shouldn't speculate, but they speculate more than anybody, And then you have the hyper spiritual people. I mean, it's amazing, Jeff. If you go to YouTube and type in Göbekli Tepe, you see the most bizarre things that have nothing to do.
Dimensional portals, landing sites for UFOs. That's where the gods flew down.
Can I
ask you a question, though, about something that you mentioned? Because actually, it seems like I was going to ask this question anyway. I just don't know if I'm right about, if I'm even close to the answer. But you said each of the tepes sort of has their own distinctive feature, or they're not similar to each other, which are not necessarily the same things, same thoughts. But how many are there, and do you have any working theory? For instance, if there were 13 of them, you could say each one is for a sign of a zodiac, assuming they went by the 360 degree. So nothing like that.
It's like this. When they started to dig out Göbekli Tepe in 1995, they knew about the other tepes. They knew about some of them, not all of them. They knew about Karahan Tepe, but they didn't want to put that publicly because they didn't want anybody to go there and damage the site, which I understand. I mean, there's no jewelry, there's no gold or silver or anything like that. There's only stones there.
Right, but still, those are priceless, and
but there's so many of them. The one thing that all the tepes share in common are the T-shaped forms. This is standard. These T-shaped forms. They're formed, they're shaped, they're all carved in the shape of a T. And there's a lot of reasons for
So,
this, because
so more
theoretically,
difficult to balance than Stonehenge, which is, not T's. They're sort of like, well,
yeah,
pi,
but don't forget, if you travel from Göbekli Tepe all the way to Stonehenge, you forget a lot of things on the way.
Yeah,
They
well,
actually
yeah.
they actually found some DNA. There was a BBC report. They found some DNA from the early settlers of Stonehenge, and they come from Anatolia.
I remember that, yeah.
Yeah,
And it's
yeah,
interesting because the one of the origin stories of Britain is that Brutus is the one who founded, and Brutus was like the great great grandson of Aeneas and was the son of the grandson of Romulus
exactly.
and Remus or
Yeah,
something, and they all came from Troy, which is Anatolia.
yeah, yeah. So
Troy was sort of like Atlantis before Atlantis became like the city of gold for everybody.
exactly. So the one thing that all the Tepes share in common is they have these T forms, and they tend to have these circular forms. Some of them are rectangular or square now. Very few, but some of them are. Okay. And so you asked me, I think you were trying to ask me what my personal theory is. I'll share it.
Yes. Yeah.
I will, because I had no problem with it, because you can't help but speculate.
Of course.
And I feel like I've been there enough. I've been there, I think I've been there 12
I mean,
times or
there's
13.
something that's fascinating, and it doesn't inspire you to think about what they are based on your frame of what you've seen, witnessed, and your studies. What's the
Yeah, the
purpose in
thing is,
studying and thinking?
if you go there, if you stand on the precipice of Göbekli Tepe, uh, it doesn't matter how much spiritual wisdom you have, or what you've accumulated through your lifetime, you cannot sort it out. You just can't. You tend to want to say, okay, this has to do with yin yang, it has to do with that and this, but it's a whole nother bird. It's just a whole nother bird. So my personal theory, and I'll get to it right now, is that I think that these centers, and that goes back to the man holding his phallus in a number of different sites, have to do with co-creation, celebrating the creative forces. So take, for example, Göbekli Tepe, the circle D, it's called D, enclosure D, they call it, right? It's the biggest enclosure in Göbekli Tepe. They reproduced it in Chanliurfa Archaeology Museum. And basically you have 12 stones around it, which is 12 columns around it, which speaks of the zodiacs. But that would be very early, because the Assyrians apparently developed the zodiac. But then you have in the
Yeah,
middle.
but where they develop it from, I mean,
Exactly.
to assume that it wasn't something that was passed down.
Okay, so the columns on the outside are 4 to 5 meters high, and the columns on the inside are 6 to 7 meters high, considerably larger. Yeah, and they're carved out of one stone, by the way.
Yeah,
With a flint stone like this. I won't tell you where I got it from, but this is they would carve it
I know
with
where
this
you
flint
got
stone.
from bedrock. Where else would you find flintstones?
I just came across it.
Uh-huh.
But this is harder than a limestone. So then they just carved in and carved in and carved in and
Anyone can
carved.
get that from sladequarries.com.
Exactly. And so the two columns in the middle, we're talking about
Not
enclosure
slate.
D,
Sorry.
is that they have arms on the side. They have no facial features, none,
Right.
and they have a loincloth. Clearly, they're human somehow, or superhuman. Okay, and I personally think, and I'll throw it out there because you asked me, and I'm not hiding my theories at all. I think they have to do with the divine feminine and divine masculine. Because let's not forget, child mortality rates were pretty high until recent time, really recent time. Yeah. I mean, now it's like 99% children are born. But back then it was pretty much a miracle when a child was born, and lived through actually childhood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Making it to, I mean, there's a
4 or 5.
reason why people were married at like 12.
Yeah. So I think back then, I think they had a real awe, or they had a veneration for the reproduction of life. I
Sure.
do. Yeah. And I think that So I see these centers as reproductive, as cult centers, where that's my personal, I haven't read about this. I don't know about this. I don't think anybody else partakes in this, as far as I know. But because I've gone there so many times and I lead tours there, my next tour is in November. And not only that, I'm so connected there that if a place is closed, I can get them in, because I know the Kurdish population is really strong there, very strong. And I'm friends with a lot of Kurdish people there. So I can make a call beforehand and suddenly somebody shows up with a key, and we can get into places that you can't get into
Do you think
otherwise.
that these were regional, like basically birthing fertility centers, or do you think like it was like different ones for
I
different
don't think they
clans or
were birthing
tribes?
centers. I don't think they were per se birthing centers. I think what they did was, I think that, and this is not for all of them, because, like I said, they're just starting to dig out Mendik Tepe and Chamek Tepe. I have, these are all Turkish names, of course. Uh, but at least Göbekli Tepe and Karahan Han Tepe and others um, have to do with that, if you ask me.
And these are
Not as
all like 12,500 years old, right? Or maybe older?
12,000 people. Yeah, 12,000, maybe older. What's really funny is if you're in Chanliufra, it's called the City of the Prophets because they have the birthplace of Abraham there, and they also have the tomb of Job there. So people, the Jews and the Christians and Muslims, come there for eternity to worship Abraham and Job. But underneath the town of
A bunch of
Chanliufra
people
is
claim where Abraham was born. I know one of the places is in Turkey. I think it's called Haran, but I also have heard in Iraq as
good.
well.
Lazarus has three graves. So, but
Who has
the
three
thing
graves?
is, Lazarus
Well,
from
yeah. Lazarus a vampire. He's just faked his death.
I have another theory about that. But if you sit there and drink a nice cup of tea in Chanliufra and there's a sacred fish tyke there where they have carp, underneath you is a tepe called Yeni Maha, and that's where they found the Urfa man. I don't know if you know the Urfa man.
I don't
The
know.
Urfa man is the first. It's 2 meters high. It's a male figure, which is also 11,000 years old.
With the lion head?
No, he looks like he's got black eyes, and he greets you when you go into Chanliufra Museum.
Oh no, I
And
definitely got that.
he's the oldest human form that we have in that site, lifetime human form.
Oh,
So he's over
cool.
2 meters high. But they found in Karan Hantepe, this guy holding his phallus is probably 3 meters high.
Well,
This is the problem. This is the whole thing that Turkey's partaking in is data. This idea of data inflation.
you
The
tell.
thing about data inflation means you want to exaggerate the date of a site.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, I get it, and if you want to lead tours to, Egypt, and you're not an Egyptologist or an archaeologist, you might say that the pyramids are 10,000 years old instead, not 6,000 years old, and I'm going to show you
Five.
why, or 4,500 years, and I'm the one who's going to, let
Yeah.
you in on these secrets that they don't want you to know. Which, by the way, I'm sympathetic or interested in learning about the things that people think they don't want you to know. I'm also interested in what they do want you to know,
It's an
and
awful lot of
hearing
material.
both.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's all fun. But so uh, no, I was just hanging on to my joke that you better be 10 feet tall if you're going to be holding your junk in eternity, for all the world to see. So
Exactly.
you gotta be you gotta be able to back that action up.
No, they actually claim that he's actually passed over because he's you can see his ribs, but I think that even then,
Well,
this is the whole problem is we try to bring in our ideas from that are formed under the Judeo-Christian traditions, and we try to apply them to something which is 12,000 years old, and I think it's like
yeah.
mixing apples with oranges.
Can I ask you a question? Did he have the correct number of anatomically correct male ribs, or did
Yep,
he have one
exactly.
extra?
No, 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 exactly. He had
Okay,
exactly the number of ribs, which is extraordinary.
so he didn't have the extra. So okay,
No, he didn't. No, no, no,
so
he
that's
didn't.
not so we didn't. He's not the Adamu.
No, no, he's got exactly the right number of ribs, which is really fascinating. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Maybe they were like universities, like centers for learning. He was like, that toy that everyone had, the see-through man, and you could take all those organs out and things like that.
Well, the thing is about Karan Tepe is that there's a hall of phalluses. I don't know if you know about this.
I do
So
not.
the first thing they dug out was a huge circular area, and then right next to that is what's called the hall of phalluses, which are carved into the bedrock. 17 phalluses carved into the bedrock. They're all about 2 meters high. It's extraordinary. Yeah.
They
No,
couldn't just wait for the stalagmites to do it on their own, huh?
I don't know. We don't know what the purpose is. Some people say it was a rite of initiation, but then again, we're applying our modern concepts to something. There we have to be careful. Even when I tell you that these are co-creative temple complexes of co-creation forces, celebration of that, then I say, you shouldn't speculate, but you can't help but speculate.
You can't help it. And even with my doofy speculations, I mean, what always comes first whenever there's groups of people? There's always inebriation, gambling, and
Exactly.
sex. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
maybe this was a brothel. I mean,
Could have
I
been a
don't,
problem.
I don't know.
The thing is, I gave Kevin a couple of things. There was a paper written in 2023, which I really recommend, by Nizar Polit from Haran University, 2023, where he used GIS technology, global something technology. That's my map there. But you see these temple complexes, they're all within 60 kilometers of each other. Okay. And the thing is, if you ask now, look at that graphic there. You see Gopekli Tepe. It's in the middle. It's actually the one that's in the middle, and it has a
Right.
bird's eye view to 6 other temple complexes, even though they're 30 kilometers away. It has an unobstructed view to 6 other complexes, probably 7, because Mandik Tepe is not listed there. That means that in some ways, the mother of all temple complexes there is Gopekli Tepe. And not only that, it is 782 meters over sea level. So it's by far the highest temple complex there.
Okay,
Maybe
so
that's
I think I see where you're going with this.
no.
Let me see.
I'm not. I have no agenda here. I'm just telling you that was the first one that they dug out. The second one they dug out, but the first one they
Well,
fully.
I have an agenda. It's not an agenda. I have a theory. Let me run
Go
it
ahead.
by you and see how ridiculous you think that it is, or because I'm sure that you've at least encountered these things. So the highest point, maybe that is the sacred feminine, the mother goddess, and the other 7, that's the origin of our, the 7 everything. They started as just the 7 sages in Sumeria, the 7 wanderers, the 7. It has to do with the days in the week. There's 7 days in the week, and then there's
Yeah,
mom
could.
watching over them because it's not exactly 7
But
days in a week.
I think energetically there's something else going on there. I think
Okay.
energetically there's a connection between these complexes.
It's okay if you reject my theory entirely.
No,
It's
I
okay.
didn't. The thing is, Jeff, I can't tell you whether they found them all yet.
That's
So maybe it's not limited to 7.
my
I like
theory's
your
open to
theory.
being changed.
No, the thing is that there's this theory. Okay, is that somehow these ancient architects, if you want to call them, they knew how to draw energy from other sites and give energy to those sites. So take for example Heliopolis in Cairo. The Greeks called it Heliopolis, the Sun City, in Cairo. The Egyptian name is Inu. Okay, that has a bird's eye view to the Giza Plateau, which is about 60 kilometers away. And it has a bird's eye view to Shikata, which is by Memphis, which is also about 90 kilometers away.
Is that
So
Saqqara in English?
yeah. So this is the question: how could they design a city, the original city of the 9 gods? The Enea. That's where they received the Enea, and then have these connections with the pyramids, which are unobstructed, even though they're a great distance away. And again, the ancient architects of Gopekli Tepe and the other tepes somehow knew how to energetically situate these temple complexes that there was nothing standing between them and, let's say, the mother complex, if you want to call Göbekli Tepe the mother complex, which it probably is, by the way.
Though if it was, listen, not that Heliopolis, couldn't just be taking a template, but Helios was a guy, though. I mean, he was also the son, but so it could be the father god as well. But I guess that's part of the usurpation that occurs
Exactly.
over time,
Yeah,
perhaps.
yeah, yeah. So I
Interesting.
find this graphic really fascinating. You can download this file from These Are Poets for Nothing and study it, because uh, this is something that's not talked about by either the archaeologist or about the uber spiritual people. Is that there's something energetically going on there? I'm not saying that it's designed by aliens or anything like that, but somehow these people were really sophisticated, really
What kind
sophisticated.
of energy are you talking about? I mean, I listen to Cliff Dunning, Earth Ancients. He uses the phrase telluric energy a lot. I've heard ley lines since I was a kid. Are we talking about something like that or something different?
Well, it's like this. Take, for example, if somebody wants to go to my YouTube channel, you'll find it easy. Just go by going to Paul Skorpen YouTube, and there you'll see videos that I did recently. So take, for example, Mendik Tepe and Shamak Tepe. These are the two newest, two of the three newest excavation things they're doing. And I walk around these places basically without an agenda as much as I can, because I don't want to impose my intellect or my theories on a place which I can't comprehend. And if you walk outside of these complexes, you'll see these in my videos, you'll see that there are actually sacred ways. They're lined by Neolithic stones going to one tepe to the other, you know. Now, why? Okay. In both cases, you can, I haven't seen anybody else who's videoed that. I just did it because I thought it was fascinating. Um, Maybe because people visited each other's tepe, or maybe because there was matrimony things going on. Maybe the priests were going to do ceremonies in another tepe, but there was a network there clearly, you know. Don't forget, people could travel, over days, 60, 70 kilometers to go to another tepe if they wanted to.
Sure.
And this is an argument against the fact that this concentration of temple complexes in such a small area is an argument against that these were basically domiciles. That's the new argument. That's the new argument from so many people now, is that around Göbekli Tepe they're finding a lot of domiciles, a lot of homes. But that doesn't mean that the temple complex by itself doesn't predate that. you know. So Klaus Schmidt had this theory: first the temple and then the city. And now they've all brushed that by the side because everybody likes to destroy their teacher.
Hmm.
So the guy who's in charge of Göbekli Tepe is Lee Clare, and he disregards that completely now. He says that no, these were clearly towns, but they do not do responsible carbon dating there. So responsible carbon dating means you have to take a sample from the same site time and time again, and they don't do that. I know a lot about this because I go into it because I'm very much involved in that area. I don't know why, but when you do carbon dating, you have to go back to the same area and do it time and time again. You know, so these homes that they're finding around Göbekli Tepe, tell me how old they are. Tell me if they're as old as Göbekli Tepe, which is 12,400 years old, probably. And I think your answer is going to be no, because once you have a structure there, people tend to move there for protection or community,
Hmm.
right? The whole,
Um,
yeah, go
Go ahead.
ahead.
No, no, no,
Go ahead.
you.
No,
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 go ahead.
finish your thought.
You're the host. Go ahead.
All right. I mean, I have to believe, being so involved in the Tepes, that you're at least familiar with the work and the thoughts of people like Andrew Collins and Hugh Newman and what's her name, J.J. Ainsworth, I think. Anyway, if you know one, you know them all. If you don't, the answer is just simply no. But if you do, what do you think of their theories and work? Do you think there's merit to it? Do you think that it's
I,
pseudoscience?
rather not comment. You
Okay.
know, people ask me about Graham Hancock, and I just rather not comment because, from my side, people respect. If they want to go into that theory or that theory, then respect. I'm a lone sheep in a way, Jeff. I'm just doing this by myself. And I don't want to diminish the work of anybody else. Yeah. What I
Yeah, I
do,
mean,
this is a whole thing. You know, this is a whole thing. When you take the time to go to Göbekli Tepe, a lot of people like to tie this into a bigger trip, including Mount Nemrut and maybe Cappadocia or Pamachuca and so forth. And what I do is, and I'm doing this in November, I offer basically a 9-day intensive Tepe trip because you need at least 9 days there to visit. If you want to visit all of the tepes, you need 9 days there. And that's what I like. Like you said, this is all Ensalada Mista. You can go to Bag Nemrut, which is about 2,000 years old, or you can go to the beautiful Kalkstein. There's some gorgeous things to see there, But I think if you really want to go into the Neolithic tradition there, Neolithic thing there, the pre-pottery tradition there, then you have to take your time to really to make a base of Chanliufra. I book an Ottoman hotel, which is also about 600 years old, has this old world charm. And then I just take people with a bus and my guide to these different sites. And like I said, and I'm not trying to do any advertisements here, but I can get people into places that in winter, you normally can't get them into.
you are entirely permitted to do advertising here. You're a guest on the podcast, so
Thank you. No,
I fully expect that people are there to promote at least something.
no, because I have my bus driver there, I have my taxi driver there, and they're Kurdish, and they're very connected there, so they know everybody, all the guards who guard these complexes. So they make
Do you have to bring like cigarettes and bottles of vodka to
a little bit of
little
bakshish,
bakshish or no bakshish?
a little bakshish.
A
It
little
does have a
bakshish.
there, yeah.
I was told by my friend Mike Hilliard that cigarettes and booze go farther than dollars sometimes.
Yeah, because the tax on alcohol is crazy, and it's crazy.
Well, no,
Chanley,
he told me that if you give cash,
basically,
the
Chanley,
commander has to get more cash than the guards under him, and then so
always.
but
Oh,
if it's just cigarettes, he just shares the cigarettes.
exactly.
Yeah.
Cigarettes are
So
cheap there, but alcohol's expensive. And Chanliufer is basically a dry city. There's only two package shops there.
so you have to make a stop in I guess Poland first and load up on cheap vodka.
That's what I tell all my visitors when you fly in. Do well by duty free in Istanbul.
Yeah,
Yeah.
let's see. All of my hastily compiled theories are not crazy. At least that one, where to get
No,
the cheap
no,
booze
you're on
as
the ball.
bribes. Yeah,
The
at
only
least my
the only the only god that doesn't take bakshish is Anubis.
well, yeah. But yeah, if you dare, then he's putting a couple more feathers, real heavy feathers on that scale, and you fail. So yeah,
Exactly.
don't mess with Anubis. That's one thing
No,
I. That's one lesson you only need to learn once.
exactly.
Even if you're Lazarus and have three graves. Uh, or Abraham and have three birthplaces.
Yeah,
Lot of trinities out there. A lot of trinities in the world.
a lot. Yeah.
All right, so I mean, who knows how long it's going to be until they figure out, if there's more and how many more, et cetera. And hopefully there won't be any more, so that my theory is actually adopted, or at
I
least
think there'll
by
be more.
someone.
I'm sorry,
I have
but
a,
I think
but I do think we should point out to the audience who may or may not be aware. So 12,400 years ago is before conventional thinking is when the humans as a civilization sort of writ large basically sort of not all at the same time, but basically started going into a settlement, farming, agrarian first society rather than hunter and gathering. So, quote unquote, civilization. And that occurred around 10,000 years ago. Then around, when we start domesticating animals, around 7,000 years ago, domesticating uh, horses as transport and war machines as opposed to game animals. Uh, so this is all these community projects is at least 2,500 years before and of course, conventional thinking might be wrong, but there seems to be a pretty good basis about it. And I'm not trying to say universally. Obviously things happen differently in South America and in Africa and Australia and Europe and this.
Of course.
Not everything happened overnight at the same place. Um, but things get diffused through trade and talk and marriages and whatnot. But this is substantially before there's supposed to be such communal projects on a grand scale, and clearly there are communal projects on a grand scale, and there's a whole bunch of them in a fairly close proximity, and
Yeah,
that sort of and there is
extraordinary.
no
Extraordinary.
yeah,
Yeah.
there's no existing theory or science that can explain it other than, hey,
Mind-boggling.
yeah, you know, I guess there's one that would say, well, a society emerged there much earlier, and maybe because it was a breadbasket. I don't know, or maybe it's they had the protection of the goddess. I don't, I don't know, and it was lost to time.
It's probably a much more fertile land than it is now. Now it's really arid.
Right, but it was more fertile then. I mean, I think people intuitively know that, they just forget. I mean, even in the artwork of like from 4 or 6 thousand years ago, Egypt and the Near East and in Europe. I mean, there were lions, tigers, and bears, and elephants and hippos, and all over the
Definitely tigers
continent.
in that. There were definitely
Yeah,
tigers in that until recently.
yeah.
Yeah.
So the climate and everything, the ecosystem was completely different. But yeah,
No, the
is
thing
there?
is, I tell you, the thing is, I listen to a number of podcasts from people that I trust, and they all talk about how they must have had a division of labor for Göbekli Tepe. They must have had a hierarchy. And I stop and ask myself, again, we're applying very modern terms, actually capitalist terms on something. I mean, what speaks against egalitarianism? You know, what just speaks about, because they probably had no financial means of exchange. They probably just did barter system as far as we know. They had no coinage, they had no currency. And I just think if you go to a place like Catalahuk, which is in the middle of Turkey, which is, like I said, one of the oldest cities in the world, it was definitely run by the goddesses, and it was very egalitarian, very egalitarian.
Is there any archaeology or DNA evidence that it was also not just ruled by the goddesses but queens? There was a female chief in charge of the people, or
In
is it?
now in Göbekli Tepe and around there, there's very little evidence of the goddess energy. There's only one plaque that they have, which is in Şanlıurfa Museum of a woman giving birth. You know, so people tend to argue that around Göbekli Tepe and the other complexes, it tends to be patriarchal. But this is why I say to you, my personal theory is that there was a celebration of both the divine masculine and divine feminine in balance. So you didn't have to have. There are a number of males who are holding their phalluses. There are very few female presentations there, except for this one plaque in the Şanlıurfa Museum. But when you go into the middle of Turkey, then you're starting to talk about the goddess energy much more. Like around Konya, where Rumi was living for a long time, then you're talking almost only about the goddess energy.
Who was
But
living?
no, Rumi, the Sufi.
Oh, okay,
The Sufi Rumi was an exile there. He lived out his days there.
okay. Sufism is like mystic Islam.
Exactly. But the Islam say they have nothing to do with Islam.
Yeah, well, right, because I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, you know what? I'm going to say nothing more on that.
Okay,
Um,
good.
I'm gonna be like you and not hold my
Do about it.
tongue on this,
But
mostly because I really don't know enough
you speak 1,000 words there, Jeff.
right. There you go, exactly. I think I'll stop now. All right. Is there anything that we didn't get to that is important to your presentation or presentations that because of my meanderings we just didn't get to it that you want to bring up?
Yeah, let me get just a little spiritual right now. Not terribly spiritual, but I think that something's going on here. If Göbekli Tepe was discovered, or they started digging it out in 1995. And now they're digging out maybe 15 or 16 of them with the help of the Japanese, and also the Chinese are there now. Um, and the thing is, Göbekli Tepe and the other town, they don't belong to Turkey. Geographically, they do. They don't belong to any religion that we have that survived. They definitely don't belong to the Judeo-Christian tradition. They predate everything we know, practically everything we know. There's nothing written down, so we don't know their belief system. And I think if you know something about the end of the World War II, because the World War II was one of the darkest chapters of humanity, in 1944 and 1945, they're not sure, they found the Nag Hammadi Gospels. And they found the Nag Hammadi Gospels, 117 of them, which were being sold on the markets in Cairo, but they managed to save them all. And that offered let's say, a renewal to Christianity, if it were. And now we're in a situation now because we're going through a major paradigm shift, which is the first global paradigm shift we've ever gone through. You can't compare this paradigm shift with any shift that we've had recently. Probably the biggest paradigm shift that we had recently was the Industrial Revolution, or the fall of the Roman Empire. And I think there's something going on here, if you ask me. I think there's some ancient wisdom being uncovered in this area, which belongs to all of us, as it were. I can't tell you what it is, but I can tell you that it might have a lot to do with going back to sort of a primitive form of religion, a very basic form of religion, where you celebrate basically the streams that come from, if you believe in the divine, but the streams that come from the divine in balance.
When you say streams, do you mean actual water streams or thread
No.
streams of thought that come
No,
from?
if you believe in a divine source, and I don't know if you do, but if you believe in the divine source, and that is the source of everything,
Yeah, I don't know what I believe. So
Yeah, okay, it doesn't matter. And I don't know what I believe either. But if you believe, if you entertain the idea that there's a divine source, then it does express itself in creation, and as the saints or as prophets or as whatever. And I think that there's a longing in all of us, a deep longing in us, all of us, whether we're religious or not, to come back to a pure form of veneration.
I think a lot of people are looking for that, which is
I
why
know,
they
but
find so many different religions and different sects, and there's so much interest in
exactly.
spiritualism and
But
shamanism.
free of a dogmatism, free of a ritual, free of a.
But a lot of people go back to the dogmatism. I mean, the two religions which are growing the most in the United States, Judaism of all things, and Catholicism. Going back to the old. I
This
mean,
is
obviously Islam is growing as well.
this is
Um,
fear. If you ask me, this is fear. This is just
y-
trying to find a security blanket.
well, isn't that what religion sort of is? It's a safe place. It's traditions. It's family. It's tribe. It's
Community, exactly.
cultural. Something that
So
you
I
can rally around.
so I do think that since 1996, there's been a big shift going on, a very big shift going on, and I think that these temple complexes in Southeast Anatolia play a role in that. I
Well,
do.
my acquaintance Tyrus wanted to start a new religion, and I'm thinking that if he and my friend PJ would fly the three of us over there, that if we studied these, maybe bring like an expert on ancient art, like Bernie Taylor, with us, we could concoct a cosmology and then
Yeah,
say
Bernie's
it's
good
the
at
oldest
that.
religion, and
Yeah, Bernie
yeah,
was there once. I'll join you guys.
Okay, sounds good. Bernie's, and the reason I bring up Bernie is not just because he's been a guest of the show many times, and he also listens periodically, as he called me out last week because I said, Bernie doesn't listen to the shows, and he sent me a message. He goes, I listen to the show sometimes. Um, but
Bernie linked us up because Bernie had a question to me about dating some stuff from Ephesus, and I did it. He said, Paul, you should come into contact with these people. So I'm
Oh,
grateful.
that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I never. Well, it's not true, but I almost I don't always know who comes from what, but I know guests beget guests. But then that Bernie has studied cave art, from Neanderthals and other Homo sapiens, and you know it's much older, but he's found frames of reference to compare to things like the tasks of the labors of Hercules, or the Odyssey, whatever you want to look at as sort of the hero's journey, and sort of found cognates there, uh, and I wonder if him
Nice.
looking at the different posts of these different tepes, if he would see themes that he's seen before and come up with a workable theory. Whether it's right or not, I don't know. Again, remember my premise here is that
Oh, he has a lot
that
of theories. He
yeah.
links that. He links that also with Ephesus, which I think you can.
Well, this goal is so that Tyrus can start a religion and I can be its high priest. So, Tyrus, former NWA champion and also formerly
I
known
can,
as
I
Bro
can, I can,
Display.
I can set you
Uh,
up in Chambly.
yeah, all right. Well, Tyrus, if you're listening, I know you're not, but maybe I'll send this to you, and or I'll get PJ to listen, and maybe we'll find a mission on that.
I love it.
Um, yeah, it'll be fun. It'll be Tyrus, me, PJ Black, you, and Bernie Taylor. What a gang of five that would be.
Field trip. Field trip.
What a road trip that would be. Interesting enough. Okay, well that sounds fun. We might have to bring Aaron Stevens, whether he wants to or not, just for fun. We might just have to put him in the stack of travel. Can you bring people in a giant duffel bag to other countries? I'm not sure that that's legal.
I don't think probably everything's illegal in Turkey if you have enough bakshish.
Well,
Uh,
Aaron's about 6'4", 6'5", so it's probably we
I
need a
see.
big duffel bag, but still.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyway, if there's
Send
a
him
if there's a will, there's a way. We'll figure it
up.
out.
Yeah.
I'll get some extra vodka for the bakshish. Anyway, enough nonsense for me for the moment. Anyway,
Oh, they like
um,
Rocky there. They don't like vodka. They drink Rocky there.
they don't like what?
They don't like vodka in Turkey. They like Rocky. Rocky's like an ouzo, but it's a bit drier.
Oh I was that's right. Yeah, I don't
It's an
like
acquired
Uzo. You
taste.
know what? It's absolutely no sacrifice to me to give away Rocky, Uzo, Upa, any of that, any of the licorice tasting liqueurs. It's fine. You guys can have it. Enjoy. Get 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 your Dionysus on. Enjoy
Exactly. Yeah.
Bacchanalia or Saturnalia or both. Okay. Where can people find and follow you? I know that we've had some of the links showing during the show, but
Yeah.
a lot of
Well,
people are going to absorb this audio
if they're
without
if
paying.
they're interested in the trip to Ephesus, going into the goddess energy, then they should take a look at the Garden of the Goddesses website. If they're interested in Göbekli Tepe, then I have a website called Tas Tepeli Travels, uh, which shows all the temple complexes and goes a little bit into who discovered them, who's doing the dig, and so forth. So I separate these two things, but I do them both with passion. You know,
Well, excellent. So those of
yeah,
you who are here, you're at Garden of Thought, so it should be a pretty easy jump to get to Gardens of the Goddesses. So Gardens
yeah.
of Goddesses. That's not. That's right there on your type down on YouTube or
Jeff, I'll
whatnot.
just tell you, the trips that I do, they tend to be rather small, not huge trips, and it also allows us to do things rather spontaneously. If people want to visit a site twice, then we can manage that as well. You know,
That's called a VIP, concierge service.
it's definitely a VIP trip. Yeah.
These are VIP
And
tours.
also because I book everything myself, I book the hotel, my guide, the bus, and everything myself. The the prices compared to other trips is pretty good, actually, if I can say that.
Well, it's not, folk. Of course you can say it. This is not a trip for jabronis, in other words. No
No,
ham and eggers, just serious inquiries only.
no ham,
Okay.
no ham in Turkey.
Well, folks, thank you very much. I hope you got a lot out of both the goddesses section and the Tepi section, and that we did connect them to each other. Not really loosely, I think fairly directly, at least if you subscribe to one theory. Um, for those of you who are listening live or during this week, it is August 23rd, 2026, so the next words really only apply to you. There will be a midweek show. I think, on Wednesday. But there's not going to be a show August 30th. It's at least not a live show because A, it's the same guest from Wednesday. B, he can't necessarily commit to the time. And C, most importantly, this very network that you're probably here watching me on, Sports Jedi Media Network, has called me into action because there's too much wrestling on the 30th. So I'm going to have to be watching wrestling and doing wrestling reviews. So the fates have aligned where my guest can't make it at 1 next Sunday. I'm still pulled in. I don't get the day off, but no planned August 30th show. But I may record something and in the interim and then drop it sometime. Who knows? But whatever it is, thanks for listening. Now, if you're here by accident or you follow Paul over here, this is Garden of Thought. You can find it Garden of Thought on audio. You can also find Sports Jedi Network on audio, and you can find Sports Jedi Media Network on YouTube and Sports Jedi Network on a bunch of other places like Instagram and X and Twitch and Rumble and other places too. Kick. Scott, I don't know what most of these places are or things are, but they're just other platforms. So anyway, thanks very much to our guest. Thank you
Pleasure.
all for Thank you all for being here, and hopefully you'll like and subscribe and refer this show, and hopefully you'll like and subscribe and refer Paul's channel as well. And if you're interested in taking a VIP trip, if you're interested in archaeology and history and stuff like that, and seeing it from a insider view and seeing how some Kurds exist in a above board black market, and see that for yourself so you can tell cool stories to your friends for the rest of your life, maybe just do that. I was in disputed Kurdistan and I gave these Russian cigarettes to the border guards and they let us through. I probably saved the lives of everyone that was there. But that would be what I would do. I would make it all about me when Paul actually had the whole thing. The itinerary was followed to a T. Anyway. All right, folks. This is how we try to blend serious with nonsense on this show, and
Yes.
hopefully we do it well. Thank you very much, Paul. Thanks for your patience and
Good job.
enduring.
Yeah. I can't believe that we actually managed to talk about these two different things, but I credit you.
At the end of the day, I'm a professional.
Sure.
Thanks, Kevin, so much. Thank you, Kevin, so much, our producer
Kevin.
in the background, and you can take us out.